Well, one of the things that are really important to me is the 21st century musician and how things have changed for artists in terms of the challenges that we have, the dynamics of the new marketplace, and how we can still be effective. And one of the things about this talk is that we have an advantage, a real opportunity. If we really mind what it means to be creative, to be empathetic, we can be better musicians, we can be better at our own business, and we can reach and be compelling to a larger audience. That's one of the most important things for being a musician and for communicating what's important to us, is to understand that as we speak with people, where they're coming from, what their stories are, and how we can best serve our human race, our humanity. One of the important things that has reached us right now in the 21st century is the digital age and artificial intelligence. And what artificial intelligence does essentially is based on things that are very age old in terms of how innovation works. And if we can understand the economics of it, the advantages of it, and the powers of it, we really see the opportunity for us in the future.
So today we are very happy to have Mr. Adrian Fung. So Adrian Fung is one of Musical America's 30 Innovators of the Year. Adrian Fung is an award-winning cellist, educator, and arts administrator. He's currently the Associate Dean at the University of Oklahoma. Okay? And his activity include teaching arts entrepreneurship, as well as the creation of an innovative arts incubation lab and a new graduate program in arts management and entrepreneurship. So today his topic is artificial intelligence and artistic empathy, which is about the key trends and developments in digital dissemination, artificial intelligence and automation underscore the importance of the role in the arts. So let's welcome Mr. Fung on the stage. Give him a big hand.
Thank you. Let me see. Do I have a clicker? Or do I just? Maybe not. I can just stand here too.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, here. Maybe this.
It's connected to this computer. Are you this pointer?
Oh no, that's okay. Perfect. So. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Perfect. I don't think I need one. So, how many of you know about artificial intelligence? Hunter, you know? Perfect. We have been dealing with artificial intelligence for several years now, and it's going to take over the entire industry. Some people think it's great, and some people think that there are some problems. The classic good news and bad news situation. Found this on Twitter, I thought it was great. AI, artificial intelligence, will give us better French fries, apparently. On the downside, AI could lead to a nuclear war by 2040, a think tank warns. I thought that was really funny. And it just kind of shows some of the issues that we have with new technology. AI is going to change almost the entire retail industry, transportation. It's going to change the way that we deal with each other in our business. And so I wanted to talk to you guys just a little bit about the economics of artificial intelligence and what it means for us, and what it means for us as artists, as students, as people that are inhabiting and engaging with the 21st century marketplace. And so, how many of you guys are business majors or have some kind of economic background? Perfect. Okay. How many of you are musicians? Come on, half of you guys are musicians. I know that. Raise your hands if you're a musician. You're not a musician up here? Perfect. How about if you're an engineer? I'm trying to map out the room. Perfect. An engineer. So you guys are part of the creative industry. We have some people in the tech part of the industry. And so I just wanted to say that even though you are in a certain place, and you may not think that you need to know about AI, today I want to change your impersonation of it, And I also want to help you understand the economics of new innovations. So one of the things that I like to talk about is coffee. How many of you guys drink coffee? Can I see a show of hands? Perfect. What happens if coffee, what kind of coffee do you guys drink? How much do you guys spend? Can I just say, how many people spend $2 on coffee? Hands up? No? If you spend more than $2 on coffee, you can put your hands up too. Okay? How many of you guys spend $3 on coffee? $4 on coffee? Okay. I realize the problem. We're in Hong Kong. So you guys spend like, what is it? $400 on coffee? How much is a cup of coffee? Anybody, please tell me. It's a small group. You can shout it out. How much is a cup of coffee here in Hong Kong? 13? 30 Hong Kong dollars. Okay. What happens if coffee was only 15 Hong Kong dollars? What happens? Would you buy more? Yes? Generally, we buy more of things when they're cheaper. As a whole group of people, when it happens that things are cheaper, we buy more of them. If you see a t-shirt you really like, and it's 50% off, you might buy that t-shirt, you might buy another one. That's why we have 2-for-1 sales. So the whole idea here is that if coffee is cheaper, we'll buy more of it. How economics works is that you have what we call complements. When you buy more coffee, coffee happens to have what? What do you have with coffee? Cream, milk, sugar? Those things are called complements. Those are things that you put with your coffee. So if you buy more coffee, sugar, cream, and milk become more expensive. The value goes up. You might actually buy more sugar, more milk, more cream, and you might buy it at a certain premium that you wouldn't have before. This happens all the time. Sugar might go up 5 cents. You might not even notice because you're so crazed that coffee is half off. And so how this works with AI, does anybody know what this is? This is a microchip. And as a microchip goes, it made something cheaper. It made arithmetic cheaper, right? That's essentially what the computers have been able to do. On a very simple basis, it made math cheaper. And so the thing I want to share with you guys today is if something gets cheaper, we as human beings become more innovative because we can use it for different things. We decide to be more innovative with things because we can fail when things are cheap. We don't mind trying things out when things are cheap. So who's like, yesterday, when you want to read a book, right? Let's say electricity was $500 for an hour of light usage. You probably would not study at night. But none of us actually think about whether we have the lights on. You know, this space isn't completely full. We probably would try to not light up the entire room if electricity was expensive. Math became cheaper, and what it meant is that we started taking innovative steps towards solutions that we wouldn't have before. And so one of these things was film and camera. You guys are all a little bit younger, right? Do you even know what this is? Have you seen this before? This is film. I'm kind of kidding. I know you guys know what film looks like. But essentially, film used to solve a problem for cameras. If you're into photography, you would try to solve the problem of photography through a chemical solution, right? So you use chemicals, you'd use water, and you use a dark room, and that kind of reaction is how you used to come up with photography. Because of the semiconductor, what we just showed you before in that microchip, it made math cheaper. So human beings decided, hey, we can use math to solve this problem. And that gave us the digital camera. So because math was cheaper, we decided to be more innovative, and then we were able to create a completely different industry. Now this is Kodak film. You probably still have heard of Kodak. Kodak, way back in the day, in 1975, they owned 90% of all film sales in the US and 85% of all camera sales. They owned the entire market. So when somebody came up with digital technology, they decided, no, we're fine. We're doing fine. Our business is great. You see what happened here. By 2012, they've lost almost all of their market share. In Fujifilm, this is an example of a company that was actually competing with Kodak, couldn't really beat them at their own game until they decided that they were going to diversify and move away from something that was going to become cheaper. They were going to embrace digital film, and they were going to use this digital application to create a completely new business, their document solutions business, essentially. So why I bring this up is that as we are entering a new workplace, AI is going to completely change the way that we do things. Anything that's repetitive, we probably are going to lose our jobs. There is a stat that I didn't have the time to put up here, but it said essentially that 75% of the jobs that we know today are going to be completely gone in the next 12 years. So in the next 12 years, the jobs that you think are still there, like ticket booth agents, bus drivers, some accountant firms, they're not going to be there anymore. But the idea of the power here is just that if something becomes cheaper, the human element of it becomes more valuable. And so if you're a mathematician, you're a semiconductor, if you're an accountant, right? When the spreadsheet came out, several people were really against spreadsheets. They were saying, you're going to make accountants lose their jobs. But accountants haven't lost their jobs just yet, have they? We still know a lot of accountants. What it did was the spreadsheet allowed the accountants to do better work, and they're probably able to give more advice and better quality advice than they did before. So simply put, artificial intelligence works in a certain way. And this is going to get kind of technical, and it's going to move away from things. But have you ever used Excel and understood how computers work? It's if and then statements, right? If we're going to do this, then let's program the computer to react in this way. How this changed is that driverless cars is a wonderful example for all of us as artists, as people that aren't tech guys, aren't engineers, to understand how it works. They used to have driverless cars, and they tried to work this out in a factory setting, right? So in a closed space where they could control all of the variables, they put if-then statements. If there is a green light, drive forward. If there is a box in front of you, then stop. Right? That's a very simple set of coding language. But they couldn't ever take this out into the road. You know why, right? Because we, as human beings, are really erratic. We drive weird. They can't say, if this happens, then move this. If it's raining, they're going to drive funny, so drive a little bit slower. If-then statements became in the billions of possibilities. So computers were never able to do it. They decided, we're not going to have driverless cars because it's impossible to do billions of calculations per second when you're driving with other human beings. Artificial intelligence changed this entire thing by putting in sensors in the cars, putting cameras, and having human beings like us drive cars for thousands and thousands and thousands of hours. Artificial intelligence, this new computing process, was able to observe us and learn what we do as human beings outside and how we might drive differently and predicting certain situations where we would drive. And so essentially, artificial intelligence is a prediction machine. It predicts what you're going to do and what other people are going to do, and it allows for driverless cars to happen. So it moved away from if-then statements and moved into prediction and judgment. And so this is actually from a friend of mine. His name is Ajay Agrawal. He's a wonderful award-winning economist, and he broke it down this way, that when we make decisions, it's broken out into two different parts, prediction and judgment. Prediction in terms of, I think that this is going to happen in this way, and if it's going to happen in this way, then I am going to do this, and that's where you judge. Out of several different possibilities what's going to happen. Right, so one example of this, I was just walking in the airport. And have you ever been to the airport or the mall where they have a moving conveyor belt? Right? I was walking on this thing, and I've done it a few times. I know how it works. I step on, and then suddenly I just stand there, and I'm moving quite a bit faster while I'm walking. This one said, out of service. It wasn't moving. I knew it wasn't moving, and I was going to walk on it anyway because it was easier. There was a lot of people on this side, and I wanted to just walk by them, and I didn't mind using the moving walkway. Knowing that the thing wasn't working, I stepped on it, and I freaked out. I couldn't believe that knowing in my head that the walkway wasn't moving, still wanted to calibrate for its speed. Has this ever happened to anybody? Okay, how about you're walking down steps? It has to happen to some of you. You walk down the steps, and you didn't know that the steps are done, right? And you think that there's more steps because you're talking to your friend and you didn't really notice. And you take another step and it's not a step, and you freak out. Does it not happen to any of you? That's part of what this is about. You predicted that there's going to be, you're making these calculations all the time. You're predicting that there's another step, and even though it's just not a step, you kind of freak out because suddenly your judgment has been affected. So this guy, Jay, was talking about how decision-making comes from prediction and judgment. And because of what I just explained in terms of driverless cars, when the value of prediction goes down, the value of judgment, its complement, goes up. And that's the human quotient of it. So just in this case, it's like when the value of coffee goes down, the value of sugar goes up. Okay, end of this whole tech part of this presentation. And on to the creative empathy aspect of things. How many of you guys have heard of the edge effect? How many of you guys have heard of edge effect? Okay, nobody. I'm really excited to share this with you then. Because this has guided my entire life. For those of you who don't know, I'm a Juilliard-trained cellist. I played in a string quartet for the last 12 years. I was very fortunate to win some competitions, have management, and play all over the world. As I met these different organizations, I realized that several of these organizations were not run properly. There's so many things that could be done differently. There's so many things that could be done better for artists, for the lower people, where executives were making certain decisions that weren't actually to our best interests as artists, as musicians. And so instead of just grumbling about it, I went back and I got my Master's of Business Administration. I got my MBA from the University of Toronto. And that's when I first noticed, let's say that circle on the left was my music education and my training and everything I had been able to do. On the right was my business training. In the middle was where I found all my innovative capacities, all of the things that I'm doing today that are so exciting to me happened in this overlap. And I learned this from the environment. I learned this from nature, because the edge effect is an ecological phenomenon where you have, let's say the left is a river, and on the right you have a forest line or grassland. Right where the water and the land meets is actually where we have the greatest examples of life. The grass is taller, right? Have you seen a marsh? Where the grasslands and the river meets, the grass is taller. The insects, the bugs, they're more colorful, they're larger. There's more animals traversing these places. If you want to really think about it, in the middle of the lake, you're not going to find a deer. In the middle of the forest, you're not going to find a fish. But where they meet, these things are closer than they ever have been. And that's why you see bears eating salmon, you see different animals interacting with one another. And so this is the idea of exploration. Creative empathy, and why this matters to artificial intelligence, is that the inductive leaps that we make as human beings, the things that are unpredictable, the things that computers can't do, actually live in the creative industry, live where we decide that our state of mind is. And so the idea of exploration really comes in this sense. You want to maximize all your edges. You're going to see a picture of a river. This river winds through different courses through the landscape, and it increases the water penetration into the land. And it creates a greater ecosystem than if it were to run in a straight line. This is the Mississippi River. For those of you who are history buffs, you know that the Mississippi River moves along a certain line and is very crooked and has all of these different edges where you see extra life and more trade happening. If you're a history buff, you know that there's been a lot of battles, a lot of wars around the Mississippi River, because this is where people were able to travel. This is where people were trading beaver skins. They were trading fish. They were doing all different types of things economically. And so when my wife and we moved to Oklahoma, she said to me, you know what? I like what you said. That I said to her, if I go to Oklahoma, let's plant a lemon tree. And she said, hey, I like that. That's a beautiful idea. And I got into gardening. I haven't actually lifted a thumb or done anything. I just got into it by reading about it. And what I learned when I was reading about gardening was the edge effect. It's a mashup in itself. So let's just say this is a pond. This blue thing is a pond, right? I was just talking about the edge around the pond. And there's grass all around it. There's a lot of great things that we can learn about where these edges become productive. How do you double this available edge? Any ideas? You can double the edge one way by making the pond twice the size, right? The distance, let's say this is 100 meters around that circle. And if you doubled it, it would be 200, right? So you get 200 meters of edge. How do you double the edge? Yes. Oh. Extensions into the center? Yes. Yes. So if you see one of your colleagues here, she's drawing this little circle around the edges, and that's exactly right. You're the engineer, right? No, you're the economist. How do you double the circumference without changing the side of it is you do a crenulated pattern. And what this means for me, the analogy of what this means for me, is that a straight path can only give you so much. A curved path gives you even more edges, and the keyhole path gives you actually the most. And it's the most structured way of doing things, right? And what this taught me is that if you can actually create more edges, you're actually exploring more. So again, when my wife and I moved to Oklahoma, if every day I lived in Oklahoma, I left my house and went to school one way, every day for a month. After a month, Hunter might ask me, hey, how well do you know Norman, Oklahoma, where you're living? How well do you like it? I'll be, I actually don't know it that well. I've only been going one way the entire time. But let's say every day that month I decided one time I was going to take a bicycle. The other time I was going to take a horseback riding. My mom's going to drive me one time because she's so great with directions. I'll take an Uber. I'll drive myself. I'll take a different route, maybe a helicopter. After a month, Hunter asks me, how well are you doing? And how well do you know your new city? I'd say, well, I know it a lot better than I did a month ago. This is the entire idea about what we need to do and what kinds of things we need to do when we go out into our new future and our new workplace. Who knows who these three people are? Okay, Bach, right? That's the guy on the left. Who's in the middle? Haydn, and then there's Beethoven. And all three of these guys had something in common. It wasn't that they're musicians and classical and Viennese and all that. They were also really good at blending their edges. Bach was really interested in what the French were doing. In his Germanic tradition of excellence, he didn't need to care what the French were doing, he just kept doing what he was doing. But because he was interested, he found out that the French had great organ-like preludes. They had these great dances called the bourrée, great dances called the courante. How many cellists do we have here? I see some of you. Perfect. If Bach didn't do this, we wouldn't have the cello suites. We wouldn't have the English suite. We wouldn't have the French suite for the clavier. Haydn was really interested in Hungarian folk music. And he took all types of bar music and put it into his minuets and was able to grow his own work because of it. Beethoven was really interested in Eastern mysticism and philosophy. How many of you guys knew that? I didn't know that before. But you can tell because he was deaf and he was writing in a conversation book. And he wrote about multiple deities, meaning he wrote about multiple gods, something he didn't believe in. He always believed in one God. He was Christian, but he wanted to know what other people were thinking. He found out about Eastern philosophy through different types of books and people traveling. And during this time when he was writing in his conversation books, he wrote the Ninth Symphony, the Grosse Fugue, and Opus 133. 3 works that most historians, musicologists, would say heralded in the Romantic period. So you can see how the edge effect starts happening, where you build out these things that give you your inspiration. So what is creative empathy? I'm going to talk through a couple of these slides. There's some exercises in them. We're small enough to maybe even do some exercises if you guys are energetic enough. And I don't know if you guys are, though. So you'll have to tell me. If you want to do some exercises, we can. They're not physical exercises. They're mental exercises. I hate physical exercise. But the idea really is that we are going to learn how we as human beings have things that artificial intelligence doesn't have, because this is our moment. You see, when prediction and when judgment are battling this out in that arrow storm that you and I were just talking about, we realize that this is the time for us to demonstrate as much creativity and empathy as possible. So creativity in this way is an approach in life that generates new approaches and solutions. Being empathetic leads to connection, thinking, feeling, and being deeply rooted in another's shoes. We can all see how computers can't really do that because they're not human. So who knows the difference between empathy and sympathy? Anybody want to try? Do they seem like the same thing to you guys? No? You're shaking your head? That's perfect. I don't want to punish you by volunteering and interacting with me. Do you want to share with me the difference between sympathy and empathy? If not, you don't have to.
Empathy is that you try to understand somebody, but you don't really need to give to feel something for it.
Okay, that's empathy?
And sympathy is that someone's really sad or in a bad situation and you feel that.
Got it. Perfect. So the answer was empathy is a situation where you may not have that same situation, that same feeling, but you try to understand them. Sympathy is when you understand that situation and you feel bad for them as well, right? That's good. One thing that I like to think of is that empathy leads to connection. And interestingly enough, all the behavioral science studies right now says that sympathy leads to disconnection. And it's weird, right? Because you think sympathy would mean, oh yeah, I'm connecting with them. I feel sorry for you. I feel so sorry for you. How is that not connecting with them? Sympathy can be broken down this way. I feel sorry for you, right? That's what we just said. Sympathy means I feel sorry for you. I call that wedge effect instead of edge effect, right? Because you're not really connecting with one another. Empathy is I feel sorry with you. And that makes a difference. And I like to call that essentially edge effect, because whether you know it or not, you're finding ways to connect with somebody in such a way that you can be in their shoes. You can not go through somebody else's circumstance or background and understand how they're feeling. And that's a skill. And that's a skill that, I'm sorry, computers are not going to be able to have. Right. So, I put this slide in because I know a lot of you are actually artists. A lot of you are creatives. A lot of you are in university and you're going to be building different projects, whether they be assignments or whether they are just projects or concerts that you have, right? Can I just get a show of hands? How many of you are musicians? And raise them high if you really are, because I want to know, okay? And how many of you are not musicians? Okay, perfect. And in that group over there, what are you studying in university here? All different types of things? Can you tell me what you guys study? Visual arts. Okay, good. Are you all artists over there? Great. Who's not an artist in this room? Okay, perfect. So you're all either visual artists or musicians. Did I get you? Okay, perfect. So the idea that I wanted to share with you right now is a way for us to exercise creative empathy while thinking about how this might create for us a couple of ways for us to mine some strategic principles. Okay? So let's just say you have a concert, okay? Or for the visual artist, you have a gallery, an exhibition. What's the first thing you're going to do? You have an event. It doesn't matter what the event is, but you're going to do something. What's the first thing you're going to think of? Yes?
Who's my audience?
Who's your audience? That's a good one. Who's your audience? Okay. So you might try to figure out who your audience is. Okay, perfect. How about you in the green? You're a musician? Yes. Okay. What would you do if you had a concert in a year? Hunter gave you an idea, which is, who's my audience? What else would you do? Yeah, what do you think about your concert? What do you perform? That's a good thing. So your repertoire. For the visual artist, it might be like, what kind of paintings do I want to put up there, right? And how many of you guys would be thinking about the venue? Right, the concert hall, like the musicians you might collaborate with, right? And so one thing that I've noticed right now is that very few of us think strategically about how we put on concerts. How we want to put on a concert reality is, we want to think about the optimum scenario. Because if you have a concept, I just gave you a concept, you have a concert, you have an exhibition, you have a gallery, in 1 year, let's say it takes 10 steps, 10 tasks to get from your idea to the show. All of us in this room, because it's a human element, we will spend 80% on the first 2 steps. And then we have 20% of our time and effort that we rush through the last 8 steps. And so what we try to do is we plan backward and not just forward, right? So this is one of the first strategic tools that I want to give you. So you have a brilliant, immersive, fresh, thought-provoking, compelling show, all right? And you want to create this show in the best way possible. This tool helps you do that. So let's say this top one is the beginning of the concert. This one's the middle of the concert. This is the end of the concert. So we're now thinking in a different way. Kind of like what Hunter was saying about the audience. Kind of like what the woman in the green sweater was saying about what she's going to play. These things all come into play, but I think that they don't happen until around here. Maybe this column or in this column. So at the beginning of the concert, I might try to do it this way. What do I want the audience to feel? How do I want them to feel before they walk into the room? Because a concert's not just when the performers take the stage, right? How do I affect how they feel? One thing I love doing is I create these digital tracks, MP3s, so that when they leave the house to come to my concert, I might be talking to them already. I might be getting some of these guest artists that I love to be interviewed, and they're talking about the pieces they like. Maybe they'll hear snippets of the music. One of the things I did in a festival that was 2 hours away from a major city, and they were all coming to see us play, I created the CD, the old mixtape. You guys are too young to know about the mixtapes. There were these cassette tapes that we used to put together for our friends. And you pop in the CD, and then you drive, and about 40 minutes in, I'd say, okay, well, look, you're going to veer off this highway. If you press play when you left this city, you're going to know where you are. Look over to your left or your right. And I tried to make it very immersive. If you're over on your left, you're going to see this historic site. Over on the right, this is the last time you're going to be able to pee because you're going out into the sticks to listen to us play. And the idea really was that we tried to curate the entire experience before they got to the concert hall. Let's say we had something in the middle. How do you want the audience to feel? What is the feeling? Could it be that you have a sensory concert with perfume? You could work with a perfumery where you open up perfume and you're smelling certain things while you're listening to the music. It could be something with food. It could be anything it is. It could be something with lights. Whatever it is that makes your concert a little bit different. The ending. Maybe it's a lobby activation. Maybe you actually collaborate with local artists so that when they leave your show, they see something else that's happening. All of these things helps because you're working backwards from something that would be optimal. And so, if you were to do some of those kinds of things, I don't know if you can see it because of the white on the blue, but if you want to have a curated digital mixtape, you might need to book some studio time, some sound props. You might want to write and rehearse your script. You might need to find and rent all the things that you need. If you want to have a lobby activation, like something with a painter or some artist, you might want to coordinate, get your permissions from the venue, notification, plan, book, print documents and examples. Get your posters out, all those kinds of things. You want to have something in the middle with your senses, you have a perfumery meeting, you create all these things, and you do some research. But too often, we book our artists, we try to figure out what we're going to play, we try to find the venue, all on the left column. And we spend most of our time doing that. We aren't able to actually finish the whole project. So that's one of the strategies that we share on how we move forward. So we're going to skip through some of these, but essentially, for those of you who are musicians and artists, being a musician, if you have artistic vision, right, what you're trying to say with the piece, that is your strategy. Your technique, your ability to play, those are your tactics. And so there's just a couple of slides here where I show how tactics happen. If you're trying to go into social media and you see, I used to work for the Toronto Symphony Orchestra as their vice president of innovation. And the joke was that the one innovation I brought to the organization was I put a red box around the thumbnail of the YouTube video. And what it does is it really makes it pop out, and people actually clicked it more when we put a border around it. That's a very cheap thing for all of you to do if you guys have social media and you're trying to bump your own careers and stuff. Very easy to do, but that's called a tactic. That can't be the whole strategy. So, I'm just going to skip through these because they have more to do with that strategy. Okay, so the effective strategy is always empathetic. When you're playing chess with somebody, you don't have a dominant strategy where you just do whatever you want to do, right? You have to exercise a strategy based on what the other person is going to do. So I have a little question for you, a little thought exercise, a puzzle, okay? Let's say you're in a boat race. You're in a boat race and there's only two boats, you and the other guy. And you got ahead. And as you're nearing the finish line, you know, it's still a little bit away, but you just turned the last corner. You notice and you look back at the guy behind you, and he starts turning. He's doing something different. He's turning sharper than you are. What do? There's one thing you might think. You might think, well, they're so behind, they may have given up, right? That might be one thing. The other thing you might think is, maybe they see something I don't see, but I feel like this is the best course to take. So I'm not gonna, maybe I won't follow him. Or maybe you think, I'm going to follow him. Because if he finds a shortcut, I'm not gonna win. What would you guys do? Think about it for a second. You're in a two-boat race. You're in the first place, but suddenly you see the second place people doing something wildly different. Up until now, he's been doing exactly the same thing as you. What would you do? How many of you would do exactly what the person behind you is doing? He's making a sharp turn. Okay, you would. Perfect. One of you. Good. That's it? Nobody else would? How many of you would continue doing what you're doing? Okay, good. The majority of you. Why would you do what they're doing?
I don't want to be open. So that's like doing what they have been doing.
Yeah.
And they fail.
Yeah.
So I think that would be something very important to make the one behind to go another way.
I love it. He just said something. He said, what's your name? Kev. Kev says, I don't want to miss something that they see. If they see something, I need to make sure that that advantage doesn't get them ahead of me. Is that right? Okay. That's really sound argument. And this is a famous strategy exercise. What you should do is what Kev said. If you're in a two-boat race, you should actually do exactly what that guy is doing because you're way ahead already, right? If they fail, as you were just saying, Kev, if they're doing something silly and it doesn't work out so well, you're still ahead of them because you're already ahead. So in two-boat race, in that strategy, you should always do what the other person's doing, because whatever advantages they get, you might get. Whatever disadvantages they get, you will get. So in that way, we demonstrate how strategy is empathetic. You always have to do something based on what the other people will do. Now I'm from the University of Oklahoma, and we have a very iconic statue there. And this one, he's called the seed sower. So we always talk about broadcast. Do you know what broadcast is? We now call it webcasting, but it came from the word broadcast. People think that it's a radio term, they think it's advertising, but really what it is it was an agricultural term. It came from seed sowing. So when people first came to America, they weren't sure how the terrain was going to work, so they had to cast their seed as widely as possible. So that's why they say you cast it broadly. Now what this means for us is that they had to find a strategy, and they were thinking empathetically for all of the terrain that they were going to meet. So they had different ways of spreading the seed across different terrains so they could see how it was going to be, received. So there's several exercises up here, but there's only two I'm really going to talk to you about today. And this is where it ties back into what I was saying about artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence is based on us. It's based on predictive models. And what they can't do are these exercises that you, me, and our families and our friends need to engage in so we can strengthen the muscles that actually bring value outside of what AI is going to do. So, this is called the mashup exercise. Has anybody heard of mashups? Nobody's heard of mashups? How many of you heard of brainstorming? Okay, you've heard of brainstorming. Brainstorming kind of works. You kind of get together and everybody just shouts out their ideas, right? But have you done a brainstorm where somebody just kind of like doesn't participate, or when they do participate, they're like, this is a dumb idea, or whatever it might be, and all the ideas start dying? Mashups are a good structure of doing things, because what you're supposed to do is take as many extreme ideas as possible that have nothing to do with the solution you're trying to find. So let's just say this. You have a big artistic event that you're trying to put on. What other events are there that service human beings? Anyone. Like, don't think about your festival anymore, just think about places where human interaction happens. I'll give you a famous example before we continue with this exercise. A hospital was trying to find a way to be more human and have more empathy and have more human touch with its patients. Patients were rating that hospital very, very low in terms of quality. And so what they did was they did a mashup exercise. They tried to find as many different places, activities, and ideas of successful models of how they worked with the human touch. And so one of the places they found was a hotel. Hospitals and hotels are very different, aren't they? But what do they have in common? If you're at the hospital for a while, you're in a bed, you're staying overnight, and you get fed, right? Hotels do this to a T, because there's so much competition, they all do things better than their competitors. So what they try to do is they might have a mini bar, right? They might have a concierge showing you where it is. They might have different types of pillows. They might look at the bed. They try to change the decor of things. They might have paintings and all different types of things. So because of this mashup exercise, they were able to come up with a hospital with the mini bar fridge, with health food in it. They had a concierge. They had certain maps. They had shopping nearby. And the patients just, all the ideas that they were able to get from a hotel found themselves in this hospital. The ratings went up, and it was a success story. And mashups are this way. So let's just say you have a concert festival. What other things are there? You might look at grocery stores. What do grocery stores do well? What do they not do so well? What does Disneyland do better than our music festivals? Right? So I did this exercise in New York City where I gave this talk just 3 days ago. And we came up with an incredible idea. We, as in people like you. They just shouted all these ideas. They liked the idea of these new scooters. I don't know if you have these, but in North America, you just jump on a scooter, kind of like Uber, and you just take it anywhere. You can rent the scooter for like 15 minutes at a time, maybe an hour, and then you just leave it there. Kind of like Cartago, but for scooters. And so they thought, what happens if this music festival had all these scooters in them? And your membership, you could go to all these concerts for free, but you just had to buy a scooter membership. And everybody was on scooters going back and forth in this music festival. And so there was this idea that started to grow out of those things, and they mashed it up with a couple of other things that they came up with. And you start realizing that these mashups is precisely the reason why artificial intelligence can't service us in the same ways. Because mashups are part of what we call lateral thinking. They're kind of what we call inductive leaps. This exercise is called other people's shoes, which is what we were talking about at the beginning about empathy and sympathy and those different things. So if you can walk in another person's shoes, what can you mine and learn from it? And we mash it together with another idea, which is from a very famous psychologist named Edward de Bono's 6 Hats. And so you take any idea, and you take 5 of your other friends, and you sit down and you try to do this exercise where the blue hat is logic. Like, how does the idea look from a very logical point of view? How does the idea look from a very optimistic point of view? How does this idea look from if you're going to be a devil's advocate? How does this look like if you're going to be really emotional, et cetera, et cetera? And the exercise that I do differently than Edward de Bono is I mash up the 6 shoes with these hats, and I call them 6 shoes. But instead of logic, you pull out personas from a hat. And the personas I've created are, you're an 85-year-old woman with mobility issues. The second one might be, you're a teenager glued to your cell phone. Or you're a university student glued to your cell phone, like my 4 friends over there. Or you might be a couple with toddlers. And so suddenly you see your festival idea from a different lens. And you're able to see your project from a different point of view. Things that artificial intelligence doesn't allow you to do. So we'll skip this next exercise there. This one is just one where you interview your friends and there's a way of creating certain aspects. And so one of the final things I'm going to leave you with is the idea of questioning. The idea that artificial intelligence doesn't really allow you to question. Their questions are largely if-then statements. And I thought it was cute because we're not sure if Albert Einstein actually wrote this. So it's a question. But he apparently said, if I had 1 hour to solve a problem and my life depended on it, I would spend the first 55 minutes figuring out whether I was answering the right question. So questions are super important for how we go about our creative process. And if we mine what it is that we're trying to do, and this is to understand where we bring value into society, we start realizing that these mashup exercises, these other people's shoes, these 6 hats, these ways of understanding how strategy works, how the edge effect actually leads most of what we are able to do in terms of human ingenuity, we better have a chance at dealing with our future. So, you have any questions at all? How many of you guys would like to actually work on a mashup exercise? It might not work because there's actually like about 50 of you guys, but if you are interested, I can email you and send you these documents and you can take a look at how this might work. For those of you who are part of the TICA Festival, we can maybe do some of that on our Saturday session. So, that concludes my presentation. Thank you. Do you guys have any questions at all? No? Yes?
I know that artificial intelligence is what's special about artificial intelligence is actually that it learns by itself.
Yes.
I was thinking, and I just wonder why they could not do something that we couldn't do, like these natural.
Good. That's a great question. So the question was that we know that artificial intelligence, one of the most powerful things that they can do is learn, right? They come up with their own ways of learning. And the question was, well, if they can come up with their own ways of learning, how come they can't do mashup exercises? Well, they can do certain types of mashup exercises, right? But mashup exercises are supposed to be empathetic, right? Because then you go into the second exercise where you have to actually think about what an 85-year-old woman would live through and be like. One of the things that I do often when I think about, let's say an 85-year-old person with vision impairment, right? I might take my glasses and rub the lenses with lotion on them. And I'd walk through life trying to figure out what it might be like if I couldn't see properly. The things and the insights that human beings learn when they do that kind of exercise is very different than what a computer would be able to take from that same exercise, right? First of all, they can't do the mashup in that same way. They can't live through having these kinds of things, having glasses on that are blurry, for instance. But they might realize, okay, well, I might bump into things a little bit more. I might come up with, I might hurt myself, so maybe I walk slower. If I have these kind of conditions, then walk slower, right? Now, let me ask you a question. Let's say I had vision impairment, and you're a robot, and I say to you, you know what? My eyes, I just can't see. And then you say, well, then walk slower. Do you see what I'm saying? We lose something there. Now, I'm not saying that artificial intelligence couldn't come up with better solutions, because they'll test this thing and human beings will be like, that was very dissatisfactory. I did not enjoy that. And they might change their ways of doing things. But you start seeing that artificial intelligence has a long way to go in terms of being able to come up with solutions that are actually authentic, actually exercising true empathy, because they aren't us. Maybe artificial intelligence could be very empathetic to another artificial intelligence machine, but not to us. And that's why it's so important. They can come up with songs. They can come up with formulas for us and why we like certain types of pieces. But you know what? Have you heard it? It's actually really funny. I should actually put this into the slide next time. But when you have, there was a Christmas song that was made by an AI machine. Have you guys seen this? Yeah. Send me your emails. I'll send it to you. It's hilarious. It's kind of scary, actually. It sounds like an occult. They're saying, like, let's gather around the tree and everybody sing together towards the moon. You know, it was just like, whoa, really weird stuff. Now, I know I'm taking AI in a very bad sense because I'm taking the worst examples of it and making fun of it. I'm sure it's going to come up with something, but if you really think about what makes things compelling, it's when you connect with somebody and you realize that person might be going through what you've gone through, or totally understand, or be sensitive to something. So yes, in terms of exercising a mashup, totally. They could probably exercise some mashups, but what kind of insight would it actually give us? And so in this day and age, these exercises help us keep more in tune with ourselves towards any kind of productivity, anything that we might put out. That's an incredibly good question. Thank you. Did I answer your question? Perfect. Okay, if there's no other questions, then I'm done. Thank you for coming, and I look forward to, for those of you who are not part of the TICA Festival, we have a closing concert tonight with percussion and string players, and we have pieces that are written from some very iconic Hong Kong composers, as well as some contemporary Chinese composers from Hong Kong. So I hope you'll join us. It is tonight at the Y Square at 7:30. I'm looking at Michael. I'm starting to talk like a robot, right? But it's because I'm trying to get corroboration from Michael. Is that 7:30? Yeah, come at 7:30 because it might be at 8. Okay, thank you, everybody.